Welcome back to the Sparks by Ignium podcast. I'm Phil Rose, the host, and today I'm joined by the fastest talking South African I've ever met, Rich Mulholland. I was introduced to him through one of my fellow strategic coach people over the last few months, and back in October, I downloaded his first book, Here Be Dragons. And then I picked up with him on a LinkedIn call he was doing, and I then heard his name pick up again with a lady called Helen Nicholson mentioned him when I was talking again at Strategic Coach. And I thought when you hear the same name 3 times, you've got to give the guy a call. So I gave him a call and said, would you like to come on the Sparks by Ignium podcast? Luckily, he said yes. And here we are today. So I am delighted to be welcoming Rich Mulholland to the Sparks by Ignium podcast. Richard, welcome.
Phil, thanks so much for having me. I think it's important to note that I'm definitely not the fastest talking Scotsman, but I am a Scotsman, not a South African.
Good point. And you did tell me that the other day, actually, because then you told me your journey about from Scotland to South Africa and now the Isle of Man. So a well-traveled Scotland as well.
Yeah, but I guess I'm culturally South African and proud of it.
Yeah, that's good. And it's interesting because actually when I listened to Here Be Dragons, and I've been listening to it again in this last week since we agreed to talk, just to pick up on some of the stories, you use a lot of South African stories in there about the way you sell. And I'd love to pick up on some of that later. Before we do that, you're also a member of EO. And Entrepreneurs Organization, I talked to Vern Harnish in the past. I've talked to Mo Fasselbab recently. I'd love to just pick on that. What does EO mean to you? Because you've been in it for a number of years and you and I talked about that. But tell me a bit about your membership of the EO and why that's very relevant for you.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing, right? I never quite got it at first. I remember when they first invited me to join, there was this big take around, this go to all of these big events, work with all these cool entrepreneurs, do all of these cool things. But I was attending TED. I went to TED in Oxford and in Edinburgh, TED Global. And, I was doing big things, going to some of the world's best conferences and events. I kind of thought this doesn't scratch an itch. Yeah. And then one day I was actually invited to speak at EO University in 2010.
Okay.
When I was there, I got it because I had a conversation with somebody. First of all, I realized all the people around me were like people who think like me. But the big thing about EO, the real thing about EO is that every single night when you go to bed, throughout the day, you start decompressing. Yeah. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can decompress. When you get home from work, in my case, I can tell Jazz some of the stuff and I can decompress with her. Or maybe I'll go out with friends. I just did a long walk and talk with a good friend of mine, John Sane, who's a speaker, and we decompress some things. Yeah. But ultimately, what happens is at the end of the day, there is 5% less left of everything that, if I told my wife about some of the struggles I had in my business, she'd be trying to sell furniture. Or if I mentioned to my best friend that had a problem with my business partner, it would be problematic because they were the same person. Yeah. And so at the end of every day, there's 5% left that has nowhere to go. And that's the 5% you take to bed with you. That you lie there, when you kiss the significant other next to you goodnight, that 5% pops up and lives with you there. And EO is the only place that I have found that exists for the sole purpose of that 5%.
Wow.
The 5% of stuff that under the shared context of starting a business, we don't just discuss business things. Yeah. It's I've got one forum that does business, personal, family, and community, and another that does physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. And so the shared context is that we are entrepreneurs with a certain size businesses of $1 million or more. But other than that, what you talk about is that 5% that has nowhere else to live. And that's a massive. It's so important to have somewhere to get that out.
Yeah, and I love that in the sense that, when I spoke to Mo a while back, and actually in his episode is coming out in the next few weeks, we talked about forums and that value that forums bring to EO members. And he didn't use it in that same language, but I love the point there. It's that 5% where you've got someone else to talk about who can just share that story and they understand and they don't judge. They just sit and listen, and they're not there to give advice. They're there just to, hey, this is what happened to me and this is something I did. So I love that in a sense.
The no advice and gestalt is the most important thing. Yeah. And hopefully, I guess people will get this from the Mo episode, but if the main thing that we could learn is instead of, even when you want to give people advice, instead of giving them advice, share a story of how you handled something similar. That's where the value exists. And in EO, you get red carded if you give advice. We can buy advice. Yeah. On any field in the world where I need advice, I can pay for it. So I don't want advice. I want stories. I want to understand how other people have dealt with this.
Yeah. And it's interesting, that's quite a good segue into that word stories, because, we've all got a story of how we've done things, and it's our story. And if we can convey that story to someone else, it starts to build a picture up, and other people can take away what they want from it. They learn from it their own way. Whereas, I started my life back 20 plus years ago as a consultant, and I soon realized I wasn't a consultant. Consultant was about telling people what to do. And what I realized was I was a coach, and that was about asking questions. But the stories piece comes into that really well, in the sense that actually, if we tell a story and it connects to somebody, they can pick up the little nuggets that they want and that are relevant to them, and they can do something with them, as opposed to saying, hey, it's Phil telling me what to do. And I love that. So I'd love to just segue from that point of view into that word of story selling. And you and I have talked about this, and that's something you talk about in some of your narratives around Here Be Dragons, which is one of the things we want to talk about today, because that's the book that got me connected to you. So story selling, it's a great word. Did you create it, or did someone else create that word?
Well, so I felt that I'd created it, and then you Google it and somebody else has used it. Somebody would have used it, because it makes sense, right? It's got all the right bits of it in that. It sounds like telling, but it's a bit of a play. But the idea was that I was very frustrated. We run a business that teaches people how to tell stories better. It's a presentation and persuasion company, or persuasive communication company. But the problem was people have they hear storytelling and they think that people want you to tell their story, and they don't. What we have is actually, if we were looking for a better, more functional term for day-to-day storytelling, it would be stories telling. So, because I think that what we need to understand is our ability to tell stories that is important. What a lot of people think when they hear storytelling is they think it's ability to tell my story. Now, the problem with that is, and I know I'm going slightly left field, but I think we must go foundational first. Let's start with story, and then find the ladder to story selling. And so for me, the problem is when people think about story or my story, they think about it as if we only had one story, that is a biography. Okay. But we're so more important, we're so much more interesting than our biographies. Our biography is simply the container in which all of these little stories exist. So human beings aren't one memoir. A human being isn't a work of epic fiction. A human being's life is like a collection of short stories. And the beautiful thing is about this collection of short stories is some parts of the story are science fiction, some are philosophy, some are psychology. And so what we have to learn is to internalize and find out what the stories we have are, and then learn the ability to tell them. Now, that's slightly different, obviously, to story selling. But I think it's important because nobody gives a shit about your story. Nobody cares. And that was, I guess, the underlying premise under which story selling came from.
Yeah.
But that there for a second.
But I love that, isn't it? Nobody gives a shit about the story I'm telling. Actually, what they do is want to connect to it. And I love that thing about, we're a connection. It's that, the biography and the story, we're not just one story. And I love that piece there about picking it apart. And that goes back to what you said there, that stories telling is the key piece there. A lot of people, if I go and look at people on the speaking circuit I see around, if I think about authors I've seen, they're all telling a story and connecting. And I think there's something there about, it's the connection that we make to those stories. And one thing you talk about in Here Be Dragons is the difference between the different logical levels that we're putting into place and the emotional levels we're connecting to. And you talk about head, heart, and gut effectively in terms of that connection piece. And I think to me, that's the really key point. And one thing you raise really clearly, actually, and it sticks in my mind. You say, think of the line from a speech you've heard. And you talk about, I have a dream, or think not what oh God,
that's not what you can do for your country. What you can do for you. The other way around.
The other way, exactly. And it's that connection point. We remember, okay, I've got the words up there, but it's the same piece. We understand, I have a dream, and something connects people back to that. And I think when you think about that story, it's that connectional point is what I hear you talking about really clearly.
Well, that's it, right? So people will remember things in bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
So human beings, we communicate in 37 bits per second. We don't have a massive capacity to communicate very, 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 very quickly. And so what happens is you want to give somebody something that becomes so loaded that it's easy to package. So, for example, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That's in rhetoric, it's called an anti-metaboly. Okay. If this is right. I launched a business once that was trying to get people to donate more money to charity to build wells. And the idea was that instead of you buying bottled water, you pay a small premium for tap water, and that money goes to water charities. And the line was, I drink my water from a tap so that other people can have a tap for their water. Now,
Nice.
when something comes together like that, it feels correct and it becomes easy to remember. So human beings, if a human being goes to a presentation and they hear an hour of content, or let's say anybody was to summarize this podcast to anybody else, you and I chat for, let's pretend it's an hour, and somebody wants to tell their friend about this episode. No matter what happens, is they're going to summarize that down to 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Even if they went as long as they could on the episode. So we want to give them anchor points for those 3 to 5 minutes. And small little bits of language can be very helpful for that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it is that language piece, isn't it? And I think there's so many nuggets I took away from Here Be Dragons. And again, that was the first book I've read there about this. And I think there's so many pieces and you have a gift putting that across. And what I also love as well, just to say, not to blow the smoke, but actually the fact that you narrate the book in the Audible. Say again?
Please blow smoke.
Yeah, exactly. But you narrate it.
Yeah.
You are the narrator. You're the author and the narrator, and I love that. And I think it's it's nice to hear the author's words, because we often read books, fiction, non-fiction. It's not read by the author, but actually to hear that, you get to learn who the person is, and you learn about your style. And I love that in the sense that you've taken the time to write the book and narrate it, so people can learn more about you. And I think that gives a really good connection to the individual I'm talking to now, which I love.
Thank you. So it's very important for me. Somebody once, after the first book, Legacide, somebody came up to me and said to me, reading your book felt like it feels like having lunch with you. And so somebody who knew me, the one thing nobody would ever accuse me of is having a ghostwriter or using AI too much, in that it's so obviously me, the way that I write, that it's actually a problem. It's like the worst parts of the book are that. But I wanted that to come across as naturally as possible. When you're delivering the audiobook and when it's written so much in your style, it becomes very easy to do that.
Yeah. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I noticed in your narration of it, and I'm sure you went off piste occasionally, and that was really nice, whether you did or not, or whether it was scripted. But it was quite nice to hear that.
There were little moments where I wanted to allow myself to do that. And also, by the time you get there, like, you change your opinion on certain things.
Yeah. So just, this isn't a question I'd actually prepared, but I'm thinking you shared with me how you do your writing process the other day, and you showed me your typewriter, or say typewriter, your electronic typewriter. And I love that, because you mentioned, hey, there is that. Yeah, there we go. Look, if you're looking on YouTube, you can see this. Why do you use that typewriter as opposed to sitting down or word processor? Why do you use that as opposed to another process which other authors use?
So one of the companies that I have is called Too Many Robots. It's an AI business, fractional AI company. And one of the core disciplines we realized early on is that you use AI meaningfully not when you use it to do stuff easier, but when you do it to allow yourself to reach a new level of hard. Okay, so if you just try and make things easier, you're staying in the same place, getting there quicker. Now, there are certain utility tasks that, by all means, feel free to do that. But using AI to write write a LinkedIn article and put it out there, that's made it easier to create content. But what it's done, that's the same thing as, Missing Link used to have a line that any idiot can put together a presentation. We're in business because so many do. And this is the same with writing now. Like, writing an article has become easier. Everything has become easier because of AI. The people who will be better off, and the businesses will be better off, are the ones who say, well, what can I now do because this exists? Yeah. So I didn't want to use, I wanted to use AI, definitely. I'm writing, the book's called Relentless Relevance, but I didn't want to get consumed into using it to make things easier. So the first thing I knew is that the one thing that wasn't interesting for me was writing. Writing is something I enjoy. I love it. I like the process. There's actually a functional slowness of writing, of typing, because your brain is thinking so much quicker than you're writing.
You got time. Okay.
Give yourself time to think about things. So that was the first thing. So I bought this free write, the Hemingway Special Edition, and it's a very, very dumb device. It's basically a typewriter with a Kindle screen for all intents and purposes. And you can slightly edit on it, but it's so frustrating to do by design that eventually you just like, okay, I'm not going to hold in Shift Alt backspace up to go up 3 lines. There's no mouse or controller. So eventually you just leave all the spelling. And in fact, that was an interesting use case for AI, because as soon as I finish the chapter and I hit the send button, it comes obviously to an interface online. I copied and pasted it, and I said to ChatGPT, I'll tell you the exact script because it's in my auto copy.
Okay.
There we go. Please act as my copy editor. Fix spelling and grammar, but leave my writing as is. So then what it did is it would just fix all my spelling and grammar.
Yeah.
So then interesting is that now I had a functional copy editor. Then I would ask follow-up questions. Can you poke holes in what I'm trying to do? Please don't be nice. Am I right? Challenge me on my thinking. Doing this. Be a critical voice. Like have the arguments that an angry journalist might have with me.
Yeah.
And then you build up that way. And then I would write the next bit, submit it, and think, is this better? And then the other way that I used it was I would have voice chats with it, and I would say to it, okay, so here's my hypothesis on a chapter. I want to explore this hypothesis. I do not want you to offer me opinions, only to egg me on and force me to think further. And then at the end of that conversation, I would say, now please give me this as bullet points of content to use as writing prompts for the chapter. And throughout the book, I share you can actually go into my ChatGPT and see the entire thread for that conversation.
That's amazing. And I love the fact, I need to go and have a look at that at some stage, because I think this is amazing the way you're using it. And you're using the Hemingway device to start with, just to write, you download your thoughts. It's difficult to edit on it. So it just warts and all coming out of it. Then you're throwing it into GPT to do something with it, but you're keeping your text the same. It's just doing that first process. And I love the fact you're going to be the critical voice on it. So that full process, that workflow is really working for you to refine the script that you're writing, but you're not editing it in first go. You're just brain dumping in a slow space. And I love your word, there's functional slowness, because that's what you're limited by.
Even back in the day, that is what I did when I was writing without AI. The problem is AI is seductive. So it's very easy. If you're on a device that has the smart thing right there, sometimes it's just too easy not to just say, I'm really struggling with this. Can you just finish this sentence for me? Or can you just do this for me? And there would be times where I might be struggling with a case study and then pick out my phone and say, hey, I'm writing about this. This is what I'm trying to do. Here's a case study. Can you help me find a case study for this? And I might just take a photograph, for example, of maybe a bit of copy that I was writing and say, what would be a good case study to fall in here? And it would tell me a bit about that, and then I would write that on. So I did use it, but I used it to make me better. I used it to make the book better, not easier. That was such a key fundamental. If there was one mindset that I think that people have in the foundational execution of AI in a business, it would be that. It's so simple to just default to how can I do this easier? It's uninteresting. You'll be left behind, because that's democratized. If you can make it easier, everybody else can make it easier. So we need to do something that's different. Yeah,
and I love that. And I think your phrase there about how can I do stuff that's harder? And you're using that process. The GPT is actually helping you do that effectively rather than the easy bit. So I love that as a process. So this is a great bit in terms of that story writing ability you've got. When did you realize you could write books? Because obviously Legicide was the first book. Was there anything before that?
Yeah, so we were at one stage, I had two blogs, and the Joe blog was like one of the largest blogs in South Africa. There was two big blogs back in the day, 2003, 2004. The one was Joe Blog Hours, and the other was Two Oceans Vibe.
Okay.
And internationally, we had one called helloblog.com. And in those days, everybody had blog roles, and we were on everybody's blog roll. We were one of the, if there were 50 blogs in the world, that worth noting, we would be considered in all the top lists.
Wow.
Much so that, for example, when Seth Godin launched his book, All Marketers Are Liars, he wanted to do a global book tour, but he wanted to do it as a blog tour. And so he got interviewed at 10 blogs around the world, and we were one of them. So, it was, we got used to writing, and we habituated writing small chunks, 500-word little, conversation starters. And the not irony, I guess the obvious thing is that my writing style mimics that. Everything is written in bite-sized chunks. There's no section of information in my books that you couldn't consume, in one sitting on the toilet.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I love that about it. It is, whether it's sitting on the toilet or reading it on the train or using it in the gym, they're nice short chapters that you can really get into, and you can pick up a bit, and then you want to read the next one. And I love that about the process. And obviously, it's nice to hear that's the beginning of it, in that sense, about those 500-word articles you were writing right at the beginning of time.
Totally. It's like I wanted it to be the kind of books. So there was a problem I have with most business books. I have two big fundamental problems. Problem number one is you get the joke quickly. So most business books you read, in fact, like I enjoy Ryan Holiday, as much as the next guy. Yeah. If you believe the title of his books, you don't need the book. Right? So his book, Ego is the Enemy. Yeah. If you believe him, then the whole book is just to prove that ego is the enemy. The moment you believe him, unless you're really loving the book, stop reading and move on. Right? That's the entire essence of the book. So the book is one core concept.
Yeah.
Is that you then, once you get the joke, you can technically put the book down and move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to write a book that you could, like with Legicide, innovation in an established organization, innovation doesn't happen when you start doing something new. It happens when you stop doing something old. Sure, if you believe me, you don't need to read the book. But I wanted the book to deliver a whole bunch of different manifestations of that and iterations of it, so that you could apply the core idea to very different spaces. Yeah. And if you tap out early, you lose that. And so I wanted that to be the idea. And I also loved the idea of a book that could be part of your morning ritual. Yeah. That you could put up, you could read 2 or 3 pages, put it down, and feel like you've reached a good place.
That's interesting. And I love that, there's something about that, doing it, whether it's in your morning ritual or during your day, to build a read time, because so many people say they're too busy to read. But actually what you just said there is key, isn't it? When we're only too busy if we haven't made it a priority. Whereas if you make it part of your morning ritual or your evening ritual and doing something, it's a really short piece, and most people can read that chapter in a short space of time. So I'm currently using the Savers principle, and in there it's one of the principles. So it's about silence. It's about understanding yourself a lot more and sitting in silence. But the final bit of it is read, the R of Savers, and understanding. And Hal Elrod wrote the book called.
Package it a little bit for me, because I've never heard of it.
Okay, so Hal Elrod wrote the book, and it's called Miracle Mornings.
Yes.
And Miracle Mornings, and he uses Savers as his acronym because he was working out how to come up with an acronym to make it work. So Savers is about silence. It's about affirmations. It's about visualization. It's about exercise. And then the R is for reading. And the S is for something else, which I completely forgotten at this moment. I'll come back to it in a minute. But the reading piece is key, And he said, read something. So I'm on a program at the moment with my smartwatch to try and learn about how to manage my heart rate. So I do something, and part of my reading is I'm reading about that piece. It's a learning piece for me in the morning. So I'm measuring my heart rate variability, and then I'm going onto the Morpheus app and reading there, and that's my reading piece. I've just chosen to do that because I'm on a program at this moment to do it. But actually, when you get into that principle, the reading becomes part of my ritual. I just do it every morning now.
Yeah. So reading, I believe that there is a correlation between happiness and hobbies, and having something that you want to switch over to, rather than just switch off. Like most people switch off when they get home, I switch over. And one of my choices to do, like I love board games, I love various sporting things, but I love reading. So reading has never been difficult for me. Everything, my entire life is to allow me more time to enjoy reading books. And most of what I read is, I've read 56 books this year so far, according to Goodreads. And I would say 40 of them are fiction. I love reading well-written fiction and historical fiction and stuff like that. But if I didn't have time for that, it would be a problem. But I think we do need to be intentional. And I get very frustrated when people say they don't have time to read. How are you learning? How are you evolving? You're evolving in absence of input. Yeah. So you're thinking that you have all of the input you need. That's like cooking with only the ingredients in your house, right? At some stage, you have to go out and buy new ingredients. And that allows you to cook better things. Now, there are thousands of things that you can cook with the information that you have, with the ingredients that you currently store. But imagine one little spice, one little extra thing, how that can open up your entire world. Yeah. Just by a flavor profile or by a thing. Now, if we read, that's what it does. Every time you read something, it basically, in the pantry of your brain, it adds another ingredient that a future version of you is able to cook with. Yeah. And so, sure, like there's something to be said for being able to just have those small little things, that small data set. But isn't it wonderful to have a bit more? And how delicious.
I love that. And I love that phrase you've just used, in the pantry of your brain.
I just made it up now, but I think it's a keeper.
I love that. I love it. And it's true, isn't it? Because there's so many people, I'm a coach, and one of the principles I use is something about, making sure executive teams and executive leaders in businesses are educating themselves on a regular basis and are taking time as a team to learn. And those teams who don't learn, they're just in its fixed mindset. And I love the point there, another bit of spice can change something up. Otherwise, you're just going to be doing beans on toast you were doing when you were 18 or younger than that. And there's something there about learning the extra thing. And the bit that's come to me just as we're talking then from Savers, the S that I forgot is scribe, which is the writing piece. So how Elrod says, okay, you've got to do the reading piece, but then writing down and whether that's free thought or not. And I think if you connect those two pieces there, you do the reading and the scribing could be just like understanding what you've just learned, or it can understand what's going on for you in a different way as well. So I think that whole connection piece really makes sense. And I love that from a point of view of people I work with, educating them. But it's not just about reading. I think reading, we've got Audible now. I use a lot of Audible if I'm running or if I'm walking. We've got YouTube. There's lots of ways of learning. But I still come back to, I love having hard copies. And I was joking beforehand, I've got my Asterix book in front of me here because I've not sit and read Asterix for ages. And what I love about this, it's a really easy to read format. And I think there's so many people out there who probably need to go back to the cartoon ways of writing their books, because actually you could take this in really easily. And a lot of people have got to the stage where they're just writing blurb without thinking about the other side of the visual they could take in. So that's why my picking up that book again this morning made me think, maybe I need to write some cartoons again.
The second, I remember earlier I said there are two things I hate about books. The one is you get the joke too quickly. The other is that they're too long. Books by default are too long. And if you look at a small book like Asterix, the constraint that it has is not only has it got a small amount of pages, but relatively speaking, a very small amount of words that the writing person can put in. And so that constraint is incredible. And we now live in a world of meme level communication. Like memes as stores of mimetic content to share with other humans. We've become very, very good at packaging, but yet we're not thinking that way. We're writing these big long tomes. And so actually part of the art of writing is figuring out how can I add just enough story, just enough peanut butter to make the pill easy to swallow, but not too much that it makes it all about the peanut butter.
Yeah, I love that. So you're going to have to tell the peanut butter story because I know that because I've read that in the book. So tell us about your dog. Because I think this is a great story about, and we'll segue into why story selling, looping back into that in a minute. Tell us about the dog.
And so I guess this is the principle. It's quite funny. So people talk to me about stories and things, and I always say that it's not about the story. And ironically, in order to explain to people that it's not about the story, I tell a story about my dog, Murphy. And this is absolutely 100% true. There's no hyperbole here. Murphy was this most incredible dog. He was a boxer. He was wonderful. And boxers are dogs that you've got to work with. They'll be chaos. Tasmanian devils, if you don't take them for walks and do stuff, they want to be doing things. And so I did a lot of obedience work with Murph. I did agility training. Wow. I did man work. So he would jump up onto the arm and stuff like this. And then I did tracking with him. He was so obedient. He would do all of these things. It was incredible. And just absolutely amazing dog. And the only thing he wouldn't do though, he would I could put him in a stay and I could walk around the house and put food right in front of him and he wouldn't touch it. And then when I walked back, I would say, Murphy, take it. And he would take it. And he wouldn't take food from you. He would only take it from me. This dog was, I say all of this, he was obedience personified. For one thing, there was one time where he would defy, where this is too much. And that was medicine. And I don't know if any of you know what it's like, but trying to get a dog to take medicine, you can basically do, my wife does the force it down the throat method. She just pops it in there. Now, I would do this other thing. What I would do is I would try to give him a pill. He wouldn't take it. So I would take some peanut butter and I'd put it on my finger and I'd say, Murphy, here, take it. And he would take it. And then I would take a big blob of it. And obviously I'd put the pill inside like everybody else does. And I would put it down, but I would say, Murphy, stay, leave. And he would wait. Say, Murphy, leave. And then he would stay. And I wait, and say, Murphy, take it. And he would go. And he would jump down and he would take the pill.
Nice.
So here's the thing, is that if I just gave Murphy the peanut butter, that would be easy, right? That's delicious. It's nice. He would take the peanut butter all day long. But if he was sick, he wouldn't get better. But equally, if I just tried to give him the pill, it was too bitter a pill to swallow and it would end up spat out somewhere around the garden. So what we do is we recognize that peanut butter is a really good delivery vehicle for the pill. Now, in stories, that's the purpose a story solves. It is not about the story. The story is the transport mechanism for the idea. So just now when I spoke about the pantry and the ingredients of your brain, that was the peanut butter. That was something that we could all have in common, a common place. Everybody can understand the power of the metaphor of the pantry and the ingredients and the recipe. The pill was the idea that we need to bring new things into our brain. So if I could use the peanut butter of that story to get that in, then that works. And it's the ratio that's right.
Yeah.
So a lot of people get on stage and think they want to tell their story. They think about the story they want to tell, whereas I think about the point that I want to make, and then I worry about what stories can help.
That's interesting. So that's I use the word there. That's start with the end in mind. Stephen Covey, start with the end in mind, because you're talking about the story is the mechanism, it's the delivery vehicle to get the point made and get it to relent, to stick in someone's emotions, so they think, hey, that's not just a great story, and you tell us something about, not just a great story, bro. It's actually about the point of, okay, I get the meaning of it. I get the reason it's coming.
So for us, it's all present. Like everything comes back to presentation. And although Here Be Dragons, my second book was all about just presentation, Boredom's There. Here Be Dragons is about selling, and we'll get there. But the most important thing is understanding presentation, which whether it be sales or conversational or on-stage presentation, presentation is always the same. It is to deliver a message, to evoke an emotion, to achieve a desired result. Right? So the message, I'm delivering a message to you in order to evoke an emotion inside you that causes you to do something that will achieve the result. The words are in service of the emotion you feel, and the emotion will get the job done. But therefore, and that's why our narrative structure is give them a reason to care, give them a reason to believe, tell them what they need to know, and tell them what they need to do. Your presentation doesn't achieve something when they get smarter, unless you're a lecturer. It achieves something when they take an action.
Yeah.
And so our job is to try and make action easier to take.
I love that. So it's actually about that taking the action. That's the key point to this that's really relevant, because if you're not taking the action, it's pointless doing it.
Right, totally. And like if I get on stage, and incidentally, like I understand as well, as a professional speaker, my job, I have two jobs, right? One part of my job is to try and achieve a desired result, which might be to set a tone. A keynote is you're setting the keynote for the event. Right. So that might be part of my job, is to set that keynote for the rest of the event. But another part of my job as the hired help is to be entertaining and interesting, fun. And so I understand that I can get away, even if the guys just have a good time and it sets the energy, that's also a check. But generally speaking, when you're presenting, if you're, a marketing person going into a room or a salesperson walking into a room to do a sales presentation, the measure of success is, did I get the follow-up meeting? An ultimate measure of success is, did I make the sale?
Yeah, because that's what you're there for.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I love it.
For a proposal.
And I love that, deliver, I've written down, deliver, evoke, result. That's the three things there. Deliver the mechanism, evoke the response, get the result. That's the key to this journey.
Well, evoke the emotion, because people won't act unless they have an emotional response to something. So intellect is not enough. I talk in the book about the robot and the elephant.
Yes.
And the intellect is not enough for people to make. There's a lot of things that we intuitively know that we should do but don't do. But we do them when we care enough, when our gas tanks, our give a shit tanks are full enough to make us do something. So our job is to fill people's gas tanks, their give a shit tanks, because that's your emotion, that's your reason to care, and that's where all action drives from. Once they care about it, then the information you give them is simply the tool. So let's say I want you to have a shelf on your wall. First, I've got to make you want a shelf. I want you to have a shelf, but you don't give a shit. So I've got to make you want the shelf. Once and only once you want the shelf, and you know why you want it, and you trust me as a source of helping you put it up, only at that point, if I say to you, all right, here's the three things you need to do they matter? Yeah. But if I just stage and say to you, here's three things you need to do to put up a shelf, you're like, thanks, bro.
Not relevant.
Yeah.
Okay. So the connection piece there is I've got to realize that it's up to me to want to put that shelf up, and I've got to listen to the message. So I've got that, you've evoked that emotion which says to me, hey, okay, I need to do something. And the result is I'm going to put that shelf on the wall.
Yes. Now, Phil, this brings me back to story selling, the first question you asked me. The idea is I am not trying to tell you my story as a shelf builder. I'm trying to sell you a new version of your story in which future Phil needs a shelf. Yeah. Right? So if I can make you believe that you live in a world in which the absence of a shelf is problematic. Now, you woke up this morning, you didn't think about a shelf at all. But now you're sitting there, and now every time you walk past that wall, you're like, he's absolutely right. He needs a shelf there. I can't believe I never thought about it. Now I've seen it. I can't unsee it.
Yeah.
Why not a shelf here? If I can sell you the story in which your life would be better or potentially worse Like something bad is going to happen if you do not put up a shelf soon, or your life will be better if you had a shelf here. If I can sell you that story in which future you can see the value of a shelf there, then you will do the work. So my job is to tell you my story. It's to sell you a new version of your story in which you need me or my information. That's story selling. I'm selling you a story.
Got it.
It's not my job to be the hero of your movie, right? That's not my movie. It's your movie. It's my job to audition for a better part.
I love that. I love that. And you know, as you're talking there, it really helps me reflect on the words you use in Hibby Dragons. You tell a great story about arriving in New York and seeing the guy on the street, and you nod to him, and you realize you're just an extra in his movie. But it's that journey you're going on there. So the point I'm picking up there, that story selling, it's about helping me recognize my needs, my emotional needs, and you're implanting that in my mind. And that comes back to the robot and the elephant again. The elephant's going to go where it wants to go. And your job as the storyteller is to help to influence the message that's coming across. So I pick up and think, hey, how do I now influence the elephant a little bit better?
Yeah, so that comes from Jonathan Haidt's book, The Happiness Hypothesis. I don't know if you've ever read it.
No, I've not read it, no.
One of my all-time favorite books, The Happiness Hypothesis. It's really, really wonderful. So in my top 3 recommendations always.
Wow, okay.
And he talks about this idea of the rider on the back of an elephant. And he says that your brain basically is a rider riding an elephant. I chose robot, and the rider represents logic and information, and the elephant is everything else. And my one struggle with the rider metaphor was that I always manifested myself as the rider on the back of an elephant.
Yeah.
But of course, I am both. And the other thing is that humans, by natural circumstance, are emotional beings. So in my mind, I started visualizing C-3PO on the back of Dumbo. Okay, I want you to anybody imagine C-3PO on the back of Dumbo. If C-3PO wants to go left and Dumbo wants to go right, where are you going?
Yeah, you're going straight where Dumbo wants to go.
Right. And so that would always be the case. And once you get that, you understand that. And so in Haidt's thinking, and I guess in my robot, where I've extended it to with robot and elephant, the robot is your logical brain, but it's essentially the lawyer of your brain. So most of us use the robot for post hoc rationalization. Yeah. So Dumbo flies where he wants to go and says, C-3PO, help me explain to these people why I came here. And then he rationalizes it for you, and then you turn around, you've got a very reasonable case to make for that. So when you're repeating to people, this goes back to the Aristotle stuff you mentioned earlier, the head, the heart, and the gut, logos, pathos, and ethos, is that we always think that we've got to do a logical thing. And it's not logical. People don't make, even highly business decisions are generally not logically made. There is a degree of emotional stuff that's there as well. Because right now we are still dealing with humans to make choices. In the future, we may present if there was one office in the business that I would maybe want to look at bringing an AI element into, it might be procurement. Or procurement and HR would be able to make decisions based on the right thing, not the right person.
Yeah. Okay. So the logic applies in rather than the emotional feel of who they are.
Yeah. For HR, that might be a bad idea because you actually want that. If a person is naturally magnetic, there will be an asset to your business for pure magnetism as opposed to anything else.
The other connection.
Sometimes it might be quite good to have a complete, but right now we don't. We buy on emotion.
Yeah, I love that. And interesting. Now you've mentioned that C-3PO and Dumbo, I think that's fixed it in my mind better. And I think when you talk there about the robot being the logical piece, you said the lawyer actually was interesting. You know, the logical, and then the robot can use that logic to rationalize why we're where we are now, based on the elephant has gone there anyway. So there's something around that whole journey, that connection piece, I think is really interesting. And I need to go and read Happiness Hypothesis, because I think that's a great story there. And even though when you've mentioned it again, to me, there's something about, how do you get the elephant? And when you're walking into somebody's office, you started there about what storytelling is about. You're getting that message across. You're using the peanut butter and the pill as the way of getting in that message so people can lap it up and love what the medicine they're taking.
Yeah.
So let's come back to Here Be Dragons in that case, because again, great metaphor there. You talk there about the dragons. You talk about the navigational map from the 1500s with a dragon in the corner, because no one knew where they were. So they said they're in the ocean. They said they're out there. So there's something there about, people had that navigation piece, but you as the salesperson, you're helping to navigate. You know where you want that client to go to or that prospect to go to. You're turning up to help them, but you've got to find out what their dragon is in the first place, because then you can be their knight in shining armor with your sword and you can go and slay that dragon. So can you just talk me through a bit about that? Because obviously reading the book's one thing, but actually hearing it from the horse's mouth or the dragon's mouth might be interesting.
So I think that there's first of all, obviously I think story is a very powerful tool to utilize, but as I mentioned, I don't think people want to hear your story. No. So if you're standing up and telling about why you started your company, unless that plants the seed of why it matters to the other person, it's irrelevant, right? So people think that was the first thing. The second thing, so that lets you realize that you're not the main player, you're not the hero. Okay, when you're selling to somebody, you're an extra in their film, they're not an extra in yours. Don't go up there and tell the script of your movie. So that's an important starting point. So that was my first thing. Then the second thing was, obviously when you're talking about story, you look at old The Hero with 1,000 Faces, the Hero's Journey book, and people like what's his face from Story Brand.
I know you mean. I'll put it in the show notes. I know exactly what you mean.
Donald Miller.
Yeah, Donald Miller. Yes.
So I like Donald Miller's thinking. I think that he thinks about things at a marketing level, whereas I think of things as a sales level. And I actually, this would be maybe a point of interesting discussion, is that I think marketing's job is to cash the check that sales can write. I don't think it works so well the other way. So if marketing is writing the check that sales has to cash, it often fails, because something can be easy to say in marketing, but when it comes down to actually delivering it, your salespeople fail to live up to the expectations. Whereas if you create a sales story at a sales level, so if your company's overarching sales narrative should exist from the point of me speaking to humans, where the moment of truth happens. If you say yes and you buy our storytelling program from us, then that moment of truth is real. The job of marketing is to amplify that. So I think we have to start our sales story they say write it at a marketing level and then make it real inside your business. I'm saying what converts at a sales level and amplify it to the point of marketing.
Yeah.
That was my first point of disagreement. The second point was, I think we put too much credence into the hero, right? And what your customer wants. Because actually, what your customer wants is the category of what you're selling, right? So if you wanted a fidget toy, here is a Lautier coin.
Okay.
That's a category of fidget toy.
Yeah.
But now I have to get you to think, no. And you actually want something very different, like this Chetki from Moransware. And I've got to sell you a story as to why you don't just want that. Now, the hero is uninteresting. And I use the metaphor of Asterix and Obelix, as you mentioned a few seconds ago. And the idea is that if you think about it, Getafix, the guy with the magic potion, none of them are anything without the guy with the magic potion. But so the first question is Getafix the hero? And you realize, well, if you asked Getafix, are you the hero? He would say, no, Asterix is the hero. Yeah. Getafix is not the hero. So when you are helping somebody solve their own problems, you're not the hero of the story. You're the helper. We call it the weapon, right? You are the weapon that they use, the magic potion that they can use to defeat the dragon. But then the other reality is that, Luke Skywalker wouldn't have done anything in the world if Darth Vader didn't exist. And I realized that my core hypothesis was that nothing interesting happens in absence of the dragon. And I didn't like the idea of villain, because I don't think they're always the villain.
No.
I think that's a very bad model. It's not just we do something because something bad happens. We're driven by fear and greed. So you have a dragon of discovery, which is in the old days, the Hickson Draconis, here be dragons, the maps of the days gone old, the all wonderful new things exist in this future that we cannot see. That's where the dragons must exist, because we didn't know where they were. So we explored and we found those.
Yeah.
Then there's the dragon of catastrophe. That's why you buy life insurance. If I die, my family doesn't have a house, therefore I need life insurance to make sure that happens. But for most of us, it's the dragon of opportunity.
Yeah.
Something I want. And between what I want and where I am is a sleeping dragon. So the cave of treasures is behind them. The obstacle I have to pass, the dragon isn't a baddie, it's the obstacle I have to get around in order to get what I want. Now, If I can convince you that what you want exists at the other side of that dragon, then, and you believe me, and then I say to you, here is the magic tool, and if you carry this in your pocket, you'll get across there. Then all of a sudden you live in a world in which you want this. And the most important thing is that we have to sell the dragon, right? And sales parlance often say, if you can sell the accident, the ambulance sells itself.
So you said a whole lot of things there, and I love that. And in terms of bringing it to life a little bit more, in terms of, you know, the reason the dragon is out there, and actually you don't want to cast the dragon as just the villain. It's the opportunity as well. And actually getting that balance, you know, it can be a life insurance, it can be the catastrophe, it can be the opportunity for a business owner who wants to grow and build their business through presentation training. But the dragon's the obstacle. And then what we're doing is we're giving them the tool, the bracelet, the charm, whatever it might be, to get them past that dragon so they can overcome it. So going back to the Luke Skywalker point, Darth Vader appears. Luke wouldn't have needed to go on a quest if Darth Vader wasn't there in the first place. That was just the reason he went out there.
And if the Romans didn't exist, Asterix would be at home in his village singing with cacophonics, right? So the hero of the story is uninteresting. The hero is the person who acts because the interesting thing happened.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on what does the hero want, you know, the hero wants to live a good life sitting at home in the village, and the hero wants to do as little as humanly possible relative to you.
Yeah.
What you have to do is to let the hero see an alternative future universe in which they need you.
Yeah.
And if you can paint a picture and you can let them see that, and that could be, and that's why when we do storytelling workshops, when we ask, we don't build an avatar of just the what the client looks like, because they'll just tell you all the same stuff. You know, you're going to deal with this person at procurement in a bank. Great. What's going to get them fired and what's going to get them promoted? Yeah. Those are, again, this is maybe another point of difference with StoryBrand is Donald Miller says sell to the organization, not the human. I think, and again, that makes sense from a marketing point of view. There's KPIs and needs and things, and I think it is important at that level. But when it comes down to a sales conversation, the human is the human in the loop is very important.
Yeah,
and
totally.
So I explain to them that, you know, and I give an example in the book of a client was selling a product that could save a person in a call center money. And it was only when we ran the lab and we realized by bringing in a person who ran a call center, they said, but that's not my mandate. There's not one of my KPIs. So we said, well, what would get you promoted? And he said, well, if I could do this, this, and this, that would get me promoted.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, cool. What if I told you there was a safe in the back of your office that gave you the resources, the money to spend on doing that? That you were able to unlock this hidden potential, this hidden fund of money that would allow you to put in this new operating system that you wanted in your call center, that would allow you to spend that extra money of training, and it was right there.
Yeah.
How much would it be worth to you? Oh, that would be worth millions. And I said, well, it is. We're just going to take it away from where it's locked. So let me explain to you where that's locked. Yeah. And it has to be locked into your unused telephony calls, blah, 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 blah. And then the person now exists in a world where what they're paying for is this new version of the software. They can have it this financial year. And so if I can sell somebody on that, if I can give them a version of what their life looks like, if they've already achieved that, imagine you go back to Exco and the software that you had said would take 3 years to roll out. Imagine you were able to roll it out 2 years ahead of schedule. What would your life look like if that was the case? Then when I just reveal the weapon that they can use to unlock that fund, unlock those things and get them to do it, they already exist in a world in which that other person who got the promotion lives. They've manifested that. They've visualized it. So now I just want to help them get there.
Yeah.
But if I just walk in and try to sell them telephony software that saves them money and they don't have saving money as one of their mandates, then why would they care?
Yeah, you're just another salesperson. You're just the next one in the line, knocking on the door, selling the same old product.
Totally. And so this comes down to USP versus UPS as well.
Yeah, great point. I'm glad you picked that one up. Okay, tell us about the UPS, because I think this is an interesting point about how do you really connect back, because we all talk about unique selling proposition, but what's the UPS version of this?
Yeah, so in, I guess, Here Be Dragons parlance, it's UDS, the unique dragon that only you can slay. Okay, so the unique problem that only you can solve. Now, here's why this matters. If everybody can solve a problem, what most people do is they sell the category. Most salespeople go in and sell the category of product that they sell, right? So if I wanted to sell you there's an air conditioning unit, if I wanted to sell you the value of the air conditioning unit here, I would say to you how cold it makes it and what it does and all of these things. And, you know, and you can temperature control it and there's a remote control that you can utilize and, you know, all of these things. I could sell you on that, and you could be like, okay, cool, that makes sense. Now, and if I could sell you that even the dragon of not sleeping well, or how hard it is to work when the room temperature is too high and it makes you lazy, even if I do that really, really well, at the end of it, all you know is that you need an air conditioner. So I have sold the category for you and for every other air conditioning salesperson, right? So most people, what they do is they sell the category that they're in, why you need unit trusts, why you need ET, why you need a retirement annuity. What they don't sell is the unique problem that they can solve. So in this example, what I might do is go to a company and say to them, I really wanted to get an air conditioning in my room at night because I want to drop my ambient temperature because, as you know, when you want to be slightly colder in order to have better sleep, and sleep is important because of this. But my wife won't let me get them. And the reason is very simple. There's actually two reasons. Reason number one is she doesn't like the noise they make. She says they're too noisy and it disturbs her from sleeping.
Okay.
That's fair enough. And reason number two, and this is one that more people agree with, is that you've been to a hotel. Have you ever been to a hotel and you've woken up in the morning and the air conditioning, your throat is dry and your eyes are dry?
We've all done it.
Yeah, right. So if I was doing that, I might come to you and say to you, so this was the problem. So I realized, entrepreneurs, we fix problems and we fill gaps. So I went and I found a really good unit of air conditioning company, and I pitched them this idea of working on this sideline. And the sideline is this. Our air conditioning unit, it does two magical things. The first thing we did is we went to some really, really incredible audio engineers, and we took the noise. It has to make a noise. So we said, what if that noise could be tuned to pink or brown noise?
Brown noise,
which, as you know, helps you sleep even better. So now we've got a noise generating machine built into a noise generating machine.
I love the story.
Right. And then the second part is that what we did is we built in a humidifier. We realized, well, we've got this engine, we've got this thing. Why don't we actually build a humidifier into your air conditioning unit? So I went to my wife and said to her, imagine there was a tool, there was a humidifier that could create white noise and also keep the room cool. And so she was willing to buy that because that wasn't air conditioning unit.
Yeah.
So let's go back to where I started with that. The unique problem that only I could solve was dry eyes and noise problems, noise pollution.
Okay.
It will make you believe that that's actually what you give a shit about, what fills your give a shit tank. If I can make you believe that that's what you care about, now it's a two-horse race. Me versus the best of the other four.
Yeah.
So our most important thing for a company is to figure out, or your most important job is to figure out what is the unique problem that only you guys can solve. And sometimes it might just seem like a very, very small thing to add up. But once you get in that part of the story, you win.
I love that. And there's so much in there, because I think, when you come back to that air conditioning, we've all been there, but you've now created a story. You've created something where I'm now not buying the category of air conditioners. I'm buying your air conditioner because you've now given me the noise machine that will help me sleep, and you've given me the chance to reduce my temperature. So actually, it's a one-horse race, effectively.
It is absolutely, two-horse race, me versus the best of the others.
Yeah, okay, because they're still out there.
No, but you're right. If you believe me, it is a one-horse race.
Yeah.
Because the only person that you can come to get, and I'm not selling you an air conditioner, I'm selling you a better night's sleep.
Yeah.
If that's what you want, and that has those three things, then we're the only choice you have.
Yeah.
The moment I sell you a story in which you believe that that's what you're in the market for. Now, incidentally, where this works really, really well is a lot of people who want to buy something need the lawyer to approve it. So they need that post hoc rationalization.
Yeah.
So now when you go home, you can be like, hey, blah, blah, blah. I know that we've never liked this thing, but imagine this, and imagine we had that. You give the other person a reason to justify it to whoever needs to agree upon it. So even if they already just wanted the air conditioning unit, you've now given them a reason to justify why this one.
Yeah, and actually the logic can stack up, because I can now go back to my boss, my partner, whoever, and say, I bought it for this reason, which links into your great story about your friend, the car salesman, selling the air-conditioned seats. And it all makes sense now, because actually those cars made in Germany didn't need heated air-conditioned seats. But in South Africa, you needed air-conditioned seats. So there's a real story there about turning up to work or the client meeting with a dry shirt.
Yeah. Well, the Lexus story. Yeah, they basically the guy sold me in a car because my German Mercedes-Benz had heated seats. Yeah. And he said, that's ticket to the game. Everything has heated seats. Yeah. We have air-conditioned seats. And again, what we're selling, and what he said is, have you ever gone to a meeting where the back of your back is sweaty, and how embarrassing that is because
And once I'd bought into that idea, I bought the car.
Yeah, I love that. So look, Rich, we've talked for ages, and I love this story. And there's so many more questions I could ask you, but I think the key here is I think people need to go and read the book. They need to understand the story, because the metaphors you're putting in place here are so valuable. Because actually, this is the bit that I'm picking up on, which is why I want to connect with you originally, because you bring stories to life, and I think come back to that thing about the stories telling versus story selling. What you've done to me is just connect the dots a lot more. You've got a great ability to put metaphors into my mind, which connect me into that heart space where I'm now buying into it, because I love the story and I love the emotional connection to it, which I didn't have initially. So I think people need to go and read Here Be Dragons. But you don't just do that. So just quickly, for those listeners who don't know Rich Mulholland, tell us a bit about Missing Link and what is it you do and how you connect with companies and why they should be using your services.
Yeah, well, we have two businesses. Missing Link is a presentation and a persuasive communication company. We try and help train people to do better stories telling. And at the time that this comes out, we'll have just launched a couple of new shorter cohort storytelling courses that people can go on. So I'm quite excited about that. We work with a lot of professional speakers and executives, helping them get on stage and unleash the power of stage marketing. When you're on stage, telling a story, sharing thought leadership, it's one of the best marketing you can do for your businesses. And we also obviously work with companies, try and help them figure out what their sales story is.
Yeah, okay.
And on the flip side, of course, we've got Too Many Robots, which is the fractional AI management company. The story, I'm very frustrated that people are not utilizing this amazing tool better. And I realize it's not because, I realize that the biggest problem is we have too many experts and too many tools, and somebody needs to actually dumb it down.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love that. And actually with AI, there's so many experts out there. So actually making it easy is the key thing, because actually what you said earlier is, let's find a way to do the hard things better, not to make it easier for ourselves, because that's the key to making this real journey come alive.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the storyteller pitch on that is that the experts, there are so many experts out there, but an expert makes AI further away from you, because an expert thinks about everything that is possible. Whereas we're the anti-experts. We say to people, we're not AI experts. We are, accountants and bookkeepers and architects and things that utilize it. We're domain people that have learned how to use this tool as opposed to the other way around. And that's the mindset.
No, I love that. But Rich Mulholland, it's been great. It's been a privilege to talk to you. I've really enjoyed it. I'd love to have another conversation, because you've got another book coming out in February, I believe, Relentless Relevance. So I'd love to connect with you again once I've had a chance to read that book to find out what that's about. Because to me, there's another story in there that is just as valuable as this one, but actually takes us on that next piece of the journey. So I'd be grateful if I could have that second conversation when that book comes out, which I believe is February.
Yep, that'd be absolutely wonderful, and I'd love to do it.
Okay, no, great one. Thank you, Rich Mulholland. So Missing Link, I know how to spell that, but I know there's lots of vowels missing in Missing Link.
Yeah, so if you just go to ineedmissinglink.com, you'll find Missing Link. And if you go to toomanyrobots.wtf, you'll find Too Many Robots. And if you go to getrich.af, you'll find me. If you have a strategy of appearing on people's podcasts, you better have easy versions of your domains to give people.
I love that. Getrich.af. I love that. So Rich Mulholland, look, really enjoyed it. Great conversation. Thank you very much. And I'm going to just say this now. Happy Christmas, and look forward to speaking to you in the new year when Relentless Relevance hits the markets.
Well, Rose, thank you so much as well for having me.
Thanks very much.